Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into a period that was, well, incredibly transformative, but also deeply terrifying. The era of Stalinism.
Absolutely. It's a huge topic.
Yeah, and we've got a range of sources here. We want to sift through them, to understand the core features, the big achievements, but also the horrifying human costs, and sort of unpack its legacy.
Right. The goal is to get a clear picture of how it reshaped not just the Soviet Union, but communism itself.
So let's start maybe right after Lenin's death, 1924. That's the key moment, isn't it?
It really is. A lot of people expected Leon Trotsky, the famous orator, to step up.
You seem like the obvious choice.
Exactly. But Joseph Stalin, who was the party's general secretary, kind of a bureaucratic role initially, he was incredibly shrewd. He used party appointments to quietly build his power base.
Just working behind the scenes, consolidating control.
Precisely. And by 1928, maybe 29, he'd effectively outmaneuvered everyone. His rivals were gone, Trotsky exiled.
And that's when we can really say Stalinism begins, right? It's distinct from what came before.
Yes, absolutely. It's not just a leadership change. It's a fundamental shift.
So what were those core features? How did Soviet communism change under him?
Well, it became intensely centralized,
Yeah.
really authoritarian. Then there's the cult of personality built around Stalin himself, which was pervasive.
Okay.
And state terror became institutionalized. Plus, this relentless drive for forced collectivization and rapid industrialization. Ideological conformity was demanded. Communism became less an ideology, more a state machine.
A coercive machine, really. Let's dig into that economic part first.
Yeah.
Collectivization, forcing private farms into state control. That sounds disruptive.
Disruptive is an understatement. It was brutal. Private farmers, especially these so-called kulaks, were labeled class enemies.
Right, the kulaks.
Resistance was met with fierce crackdowns, and the result, tragically, was widespread famine.
The Holodomor in Ukraine being the most infamous example.
Yes, a Holodomor was devastating. Millions died across the Soviet Union from starvation, from repression linked to collectivization. It was a human catastrophe.
Even while the state might have claimed some success in, say, grain procurement eventually.
Well, yes, there were claims of increased output in some metrics, but the cost to the peasantry, to rural life, was just immense.
And at the very same time, he launches the five-year plans. This push for heavy industry, steel, coal, weapons.
The massive push.
Yeah.
And it did transform the Soviet Union. It went from a largely agrarian society to a major industrial power remarkably quickly.
That laid the groundwork for its military might later on, didn't it?
It absolutely did. But again, we have to ask about the cost.
Okay, what was the flip side of that industrial boom?
Terrible working conditions, often dangerous, very few consumer goods for ordinary people, and critically, the widespread use of forced labor.
The Gulag system.
Exactly. Millions were forced into labor camps, contributing to this industrial output under the most brutal conditions imaginable. So you have this stark duality, undeniable industrial gains, but achieved through immense suffering.
And woven through all of this was fear. You mentioned state terror, the Great Purge, 36 to 38. That sounds like peak terror.
It was. It's difficult to even fathom the scale. Party leaders, intellectuals, military officers, ordinary citizens, suddenly accused of treason.
Just anyone could be targeted.
Pretty much. There were show trials, torture was routine, summary executions, millions sent to the gulags. Estimates are, well, staggering, perhaps over 1 million executed just in those few years, millions more imprisoned.
How did society even function under that kind of pressure?
Through fear, constant surveillance, the encouragement of denunciation, neighbor turned against neighbor, loyalty, or the appearance of it, was paramount for survival.
And layered on top of the fear was this cult of personality, making Stalin seem godlike.
Oh, completely. History was rewritten to inflate his role, diminish others. Art, literature, education, everything was marshaled to glorify Stalin. It presented him as this infallible, wise leader.
A way to mask the brutality, perhaps, and enforce obedience.
Absolutely. It demanded total loyalty and obscured the grim reality for many.
Now let's shift to World War II. Stalin's role there is complicated, isn't it? Starting with the pact with Hitler.
Very complicated. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact in '39 was a pragmatic but deeply cynical move, effectively dividing Eastern Europe.
But then the Nazis invade in 41.
And Stalin leads the defense. It was brutal. The losses were almost unimaginable. Maybe 27 million Soviet lives lost in the war.
27 million.
But the Soviet Union did prevail. Victories like Stalingrad and pushing the Nazis back to Berlin were decisive. and it elevated the USSR to superpower status.
Which then led directly into the post-war era.
Yes, the imposition of communist regimes across Eastern Europe, spheres of influence. The Cold War essentially begins right there.
Stalin dies in 53. What happens then? Does it just continue?
Not exactly. His successor, Nikita Khrushchev, gave that famous secret speech in 1956.
Right, denouncing Stalin's crime.
He exposed the cult of personality, the purges, the terror. It was a shock, and it initiated a period of de-Stalinization. But the legacy, the debate over Stalin, it persists even today.
How so? What's the core debate?
Well, you still have those who credit him with industrializing the nation, with defeating fascism, arguing he did what was necessary, however harsh.
Okay.
But critics, and there are many, point to the totalitarian control, the unimaginable human cost, the betrayal of any socialist or communist ideals of liberation.
So it really is this double-edged legacy, isn't it? A global power forge, but at a cost that's just staggering.
Exactly. It claimed to be building on Marx and Lenin, but the reality was a system rooted in fear, not freedom.
Which leaves us with a pretty profound question to think about, doesn't it? What does it actually mean when an ideology that talks about liberation becomes a justification for such unprecedented repression?
Yeah, and how do societies grapple with that? How do you reconcile massive achievements like industrialization or winning a world war with the immense horrifying suffering that went alongside it? Does that history change how we even define progress?
A lot to think about there. Thanks for joining this deep dive.